Okay, welcome everybody. This is a really complicated issue that we've been talking about for decades. And two of my mentors are here and back with us, for which we are so grateful to talk about this complicated issue that I don't think we have all the answers for. And I think we'll realize today, some of the issues we still need to figure out, but we know that it is a problem. So I'm so happy that Dr. Bob Dahlhausen is back with us to talk specifically about this. He owns the VMD lab, which has the only current test for ganglioneuritis. And of course, the famous Dr. Susan Orosz, who
but
knows
also
everything
tell people,
everything.
But Bob, sorry.
Susan, you're too kind.
Well, Bob is also a clinician. And a lot of people do not understand that. And Bob has been, we went to vet school together. He was in the class in front of me at Ohio State. And he was the smart one. And he also was the person who was in
got the PhD.
You
got the PhD, Susan. Come on.
I think we could agree you're both smart cookies. So,
but I think it's important that the group understands that Bob sees birds in clinical practice, and he's not just a lab guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
For 40 years. So.
Yeah.
40, all right. This complicated issue. Where do we start?
Okay, I'm going to just start. Okay, because I have the sheet
of all the. Yes. Okay. Oh, let me say one more thing, Dr. Orosz. Some of you sent in questions, and thank you for that. And we've tried to organize them in a way that we can kind of go through them today methodically. But if you have more questions, which I'm sure you will, please remember to put them in the Q&A and to make them questions that can benefit everybody, not just my bird, this or that. Try to turn it into a question that applies to birds in general. That would be very helpful for the overall audience. Okay, take it away, Dr. Orosz.
Okay, so Anne, Bob wanted us to start off with talking about PDD is and how it's called, and versus avian bornavirus, and
versus ganglioneuritis.
Versus ganglioneuritis. So PDD is a term that was used back when Bob and I were in vet school and shortly after, which was proventicular dilatation disease, where we saw large, aka dilated proventriculuses, which is the first part of the stomach, in things like blue and gold macaws. So it seemed to be a macaw thing at first, or at least that's what we suspected it to be. And so that's how it got the name PDD, proventicular dilatation disease. Well, but then as things kind of evolved in our understanding of it, and as Anne is indicating, it's going to continue to evolve, that in trying to understand this disease process, the question became, what caused this disease? And how could we better characterize this disease? So that's when a group of people worked really diligently on finding a viral origin. So a viral origin is avian bornavirus. So it's been determined by Koch's postulates, which is a scientific thing. Sorry, Anne. That this proventicular dilatation disease was the consequence of avian bornavirus. However, Dr. Dahlhausen and I and Dr. Giacomo Rossi have wanted to expand that. Many, many years ago, Dr. Rossi came and he spoke very poor English, and I can't speak any Italian. And so he gave a talk where he recreated this proventicular dilatation disease in some cockatiels without the virus.
Bornavirus.
Without the bornavirus. Or any virus, honestly. There was no virus involved in it at all. And so he created the symptoms. And his conclusion was that it's an autoimmune disease. I mean, that's where we're going with this from that perspective. If you're in a different camp, your mind will only let you have it as avian bornavirus. But
That's the
you have to have the
cause.
virus, and then it causes neurologic symptoms. Now we understand that, I know this is a little bit long, but stay with me. If the neurologic symptoms are diverse and depends on the bird species, and therefore it also depends on when the bird was exposed to the event.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all those.
Yeah, and so that's why the better word would be to call it avian ganglioneuritis, because from a pathologic point of view, something happens to the ganglia or the nerves of this bird to create the symptoms.
So today, I'm
let me
going to try
interject
to
here, okay?
clarify language. Every time we divert into confusing language, I'm going to be your, did you mean ganglioneuritis or did you mean bornavirus? Okay. Just because I think everybody gets confused. So just, you're setting the stage for the language. That's the most important part.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to add that the experiment that Giacomo Rossi did in Italy was repeated here in the United States. And what was done was to inoculate gangliosides into a cockatiel. And that bird, in 80 to 90 days later, developed an immune response to the neurogangliosides that it was inoculated with. And if you looked at the histopathology on that bird, and if you looked just on the gross examination on the postmortem exam, that bird looked like a macaw with full-blown PDD, okay? And early on, when we were investigating this condition of PDD in these macaws, based on the histopathology, it was referred to as, or often thought of as an autoimmune disease, okay? And the important point here for you to understand is that, people think that we have a virus, we get infected with a virus, we get the disease, okay? But with avian bornavirus, birds can be infected with the bornavirus. 90% of those birds are negative. I mean, as far as clinical disease goes down the road, they will remain normal and healthy throughout their lifespan, okay? And we know about 1 out of 3 birds are positive for avian bornavirus. However, we do know that those that show the clinical signs, okay, which is basically an immune reaction or an autoimmune reaction to these neurogangliosides, which are distributed all throughout the nervous system. And there's over 50 of these different gangliosides throughout the body. And once they mount an immune response to that, wherever those gangliosides are located, that causes inflammation. That causes then the clinical disease that we see. So we can see birds with seizures. We could see birds with, dilated digestive tracts. We can see birds that are self-mutilating. It really depends on where that inflammatory reaction is occurring. Now, to complicate things, we talked about avian bornavirus, but we know that there are other agents, other viruses, other bacteria that can stimulate, I should say, an immune reaction. That immune reaction will cross-react with certain gangliosides, causing clinical disease that is indistinguishable from that caused by avian bornavirus. In other words, we know that there are a number of different agents: mycoplasma, chlamydia, paramyxovirus, encephalitis virus. All these can cause a cross reaction with the gangliosides. Susan, am I getting too deep on this? But
Yeah, we might want to go back to the beginning and kind of
okay,
methodically
okay,
go through things, if that's okay. Just because
yeah, sure.
a lot of the people here today, I think we have some veterinarians here, and I'm sure they will be listening in the future as well. But we also have a lot of people here today who just need to understand the basics of
Well,
the disease.
okay, let me
ganglioneuritis.
let me just give you an example. So here is the myelin sheath around the nerve. And what Bob is saying is this myelin sheath has these gangliosides. That's just the word. That's a type of chemical. Okay, so don't get hung up on the chemical name. So this is the wrapping.
Part of the nerve structure.
Right. It's the thing that surrounds the nerve. It's the insulating wrapping. And something which could be bornavirus, as he said, chlamydia, Campylobacter, something attacks that wrapping. And when it attacks the wrapping, then the inside the wrapping becomes exposed. But the immune system never saw that before. It only saw this. Now it sees this and goes, oh my God, what the hell is that? And then it attacks it. That's it. That's it. That's it. And that's it. That's how simple it is. And it's not hard, it's simple.
There, I love that. That was great. So would you call this a disease? Yeah, okay.
Because
Yeah.
the bird's shown clinical signs.
Okay, let's go back to the very beginning, if you don't mind. And we're only talking about
Okay.
ganglioneuritis. We're not talking about bornavirus, because I'm trying to be very clear to distinguish between the conditions or the diseases. Okay, so are they born with it or do they acquire it?
Ganglioneuritis. Hold on.
Only ganglioneuritis, not bornavirus.
If only
Yeah.
we knew.
Okay, we don't know. Okay.
But ganglioneuritis is an inflammation of the nerves. Okay. They are not born with inflammation of the nerves.
Perfect. See?
No, wait.
Okay.
It's not that easy, Ann.
All right.
So there I was in Zurich, sitting next to Helga Gerlach. If you ever been
You're going to talk about bornavirus now.
interrogated.
We're not talking about bornavirus. We're talking about ganglioneuritis.
Here's the thing. So you asked me, so the question is, how is it that they get this?
This disease. How do they acquire this disease?
But the ganglioneuritis comes as the inflammatory part. But how do we get to that inflammatory part?
Right.
Okay, so Bob and I did a trace back on a long time ago on a bunch of young birds that were going to be used. Eventually they went into a pet store situation.
Pet store. Yeah.
Yeah, but they came from, so we examined the records of all these different birds. And here was the telling piece of information. The trail led to a particular aviary. And in the aviary owner said, and we had no intention to be mean. We were just trying to understand this disease. And that was, they said, listen, it can't be me, because I take all of my eggs and I pull them and I incubate them. And then we hatch the baby chicks and we hand raise them. So it can't be me. But it was.
Exactly.
So we knew
ganglioneuritis or you're talking about ganglioneuritis, right?
The condition, the disease. When we saw birds with the disease, inflammatory disease, those birds came from eggs that were that were put in an incubator. So we knew that the process of getting to that disease state had to be very early in that
Right, which is
chick's
bornavirus.
development.
We now know that pretty much
It
for
doesn't have to be
bornavirus.
bornavirus. It could be bornavirus. It doesn't have to be exactly be bornavirus. It could be they could have been exposed to Campylobacter. I mean, there could be a variety of things. See?
Okay, but it's not I'm just focused on I'm bringing us back to ganglioneuritis.
But you asked, how do they get the ganglioneuritis?
Right.
So Bob stepped us back to it was inflammatory. Then I stepped you back to the point was the birds that were dying from this, they had exposure or something happened to them while those little chicks were still in the egg. So now the question becomes, how is this disease transmitted to where there is clinical signs of disease? That's a very complex question. You just thought you wanted, just like, the Germans, they want a one-word answer. It's in the respiratory tract. Well, it's not that easy in this situation,
But it could
okay?
be multiple things that happen that way. But does ganglioneuritis happen that way? That's my question.
Ganglioneuritis is the disease. That's what causes the clinical signs that you see. The thing to keep in mind is that there are many, many, many etiologies that can cause the inflammation of the nerves.
Yeah.
Some of those, like Susan was saying, can be inherited. We know that avian bornavirus is, I would say, a major cause of this disease, but it is not the only cause of this disease.
But they can be born with bornavirus, but they're not necessarily born with ganglioneuritis.
Ganglioneuritis is the disease. That is correct.
So, but
Right.
again, the language gets complicated. So I want people to take away that they understand that they may be born with things that cause inflammation, but they're not born with ganglioneuritis. That is the result of other things that affects them that they may have been born with, but they're not born with ganglioneuritis per se. Just
correct.
Okay. Great.
But they might show symptoms pretty damn early.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Or not. Or they could.
Or not.
And then as I say to owners when they come up, this is something that you all should know. They'll say, oh, my bird tested positive for bornavirus. And my response to that is, well, it could die from something else.
I mean, you told us in 2005 when it first came out, bornavirus equals PDD, they're all going to die. And I said, do we have to worry about where we place birds in homes? And you said, no, that is not.
Well, okay, so I think this is jumping ahead. I'm afraid to say this.
Let's don't jump ahead. Okay. All right. So you talked about how the nerve gets disrupted. That was a wonderful metaphor. I love that. Now is a good time to talk about how that affects nerves in different parts of the body according to the species, because that's often the case, right?
It's an excellent question, and that's something we are anticipating to research because we have over 50 different gangliosides. I want to back up just a second because we're talking about this being inherited, through the egg and that. That's
one way.
Yes, but when we see chicks develop signs of, quote, avian ganglioneuritis, it does not occur until about the time those birds are fledging. They're starting to develop competent immune systems. And that basically supports the point that this is, quote, an autoimmune reaction. In other words, the host immune system is attacking these nerves. Okay. And that's why, we looked at a group of Kias where both parents were positive for avian bornavirus. We evaluated 22 eggs that were artificially incubated that did not hatch out. And we even, those that had a little embryo in there, we actually sent that for histopathology. None of the histopathology showed the characteristic inflammatory response that we see with avian ganglioneuritis. Why? Because it didn't have a competent immune system to cause that reaction. But we found out of those 22 eggs, 21 of those eggs in the vitelline membrane were positive for avian bornavirus. So again, both parents positive, 21 out of 22 eggs were positive for bornavirus. Okay. But again, these birds did not start to show signs until they were, close to weaning. And that corresponds with when the immune system becomes competent. And that is the basis of this disease, avian ganglioneuritis, is this autoimmune reaction. Okay.
Great. Makes sense. So
Okay, wait a minute. So Anne, let's go back to this analogy again.
Okay.
So what Bob is saying is that in different parts of the brain, this wrapping has different gangliosides. So the structure of it, the gangliosides represent the structure, and the structure of it can be different. So there'll be certain gangliosides that'll be very predominant in certain areas of the brain.
not always the 10th cranial nerve.
Yeah, and
Which I
like
know
some
is
cranial
more-
nerves have a certain type of
Right.
certain type of, so the wrapping, the components of the wrapping varies. Because the components of the wrapping varies, that is probably the reason why certain structures in the brain are more likely to be affected. For example, so there's this nucleus in the medulla of the brain.
She can't help herself. I know.
I can't help myself, which is the 10th cranial nerve, which becomes a 10th cranial nerve. And that nerve goes to the stomach, and it goes to the crop in the stomach. And so that's why the bornavirus was more likely to attack those ganglioproteins of that 10th cranial nerve and create symptoms. So that created the PDD thing, okay? It's a form of ganglioneuritis.
Mm-hmm.
Can I comment on that?
Yep.
Okay. First of all, it's not so much that the virus attacks those nerves. The virus actually transits across those nerves. It may attack the nerves, but as it transits, it exposes the certain gangliosides in the
I'm
membrane.
simplifying it.
Yeah, and that's what caused, then the host immune system says, oh my gosh, what's this? As Susan said, and it mounts an immune response to it. There you go. And that's what causes the disease, the signs, the clinical signs we see. So backing up a little bit to your earlier question, we're looking at, and one of our projects is to measure the certain antibodies to certain gangliosides, okay? And we know, again, as I mentioned, there's over 50 of these in the body, okay, and of these birds. Why do we generally see lower brainstem signs with cockatoos, ataxia, African grays will see seizures, or we'll see spinal cord lesions where they're self-mutilating. Macaws, we generally see GI tract signs. Is this because they have a different distribution of gangliosides throughout their body? In other words, bornavirus may cause them to mount an immune response to the GM1, the first ganglioside, but in cockatoos, it's in their brain, and in macaws, it's in their stomach. Or do they develop certain antibodies like macaws to the gangliosides in their stomach, whereas in cockatoos to the gangliosides in their brain? So what we're trying to do is elucidate, why do we see different clinical presentations of avian ganglioneuritis? And it either depends on the distribution of these 50 different gangliosides, where are they at, or the antibodies, the autoimmune response recognizing maybe just one or two, but they're different in cockatoos from macaws, from conures and African greys and so forth. Does
So
that make
interesting.
sense? Does that make sense?
If the 10th cranial nerve in macaws relates to the digestive tract, is that same cranial nerve what African greys connect for balance or seizures, or is it a different
No, well,
part of
mm,
the brain?
maybe.
Is that part of
Um,
what you're saying? You don't know where it attacks exactly?
Susan, isn't it pretty similar among birds?
yeah. So the nerve itself is the same, and there is a bit of the 10th cranial nerve can be involved in balance. It's these ganglioside proteins that probably are different in cockatoos from macaws, and yet there's some of them there, because if I do a fluoroscopy, let's say you have a cockatoo that's seizuring, or it's doing the thing with its foot like this, you know. If I do a fluoroscopy, I will see the proventricus and the ventricus motility will be off also, but not at the level that you would see it be off in a macaw, for example. It'd be really off in the macaw, potentially. Oh, you're trying to get me to.
There's something related to balance and ataxia and all that, that for the
Yeah, there's this
thing.
little extra nerve from the 10th cranial nerve that can affect that. And so maybe the ganglioside proteins are different, but I think the balance thing in the cockatoo is a different nerve. I think it's involved the 8th cranial nerve, which is a different nerve.
Interesting. The interesting thing is, if you run histopathology in the GI tract from macaws with digestive tract lesions or cockatoos with neurologic signs, they will also show the characteristic inflammatory reaction in the GI tract, although that reaction is not severe enough to cause the GI tract signs that we see in macaws, but it's there.
Yeah.
And
So somebody just asked about that. So Mary, we don't know
Those questions.
because there's no money for this, but we don't know the pattern of gangliosides in like a macaw versus a cockatoo versus an African gray. However,
Right.
there's a lot of similarities. I mean, the nerve hookup between the brain and the rest of the body is the same, or at least we think so. but the ganglioside proteins are probably a little off. They're probably different enough. They're different enough that gives us the difference in the symptoms.
Probably a combination of both, isn't it?
Yeah.
So going back to our questions, so if a bird tests positive, and maybe even died or is symptomatic, do we have to worry
Test
about
positive for what?
ganglioneuritis? Always ganglioneuritis unless I say otherwise. Okay, so if a bird tests positive for ganglioneuritis, is symptomatic, maybe even died, do we have to worry about the other birds in the same room? In other words, is it contagious once a bird goes symptomatic? Okay, great. I love that answer.
Can I say something though?
Please.
Okay. Part of the problem here is when you're dealing with the average Joe and the average veterinarian, they're thinking of diseases like the flu. Anne comes over to my house and I get the flu, or I have the flu, but I give it to her. Okay, we said in the very beginning of this thing that this ganglioneuritis condition, the disease of it, is an autoimmune disease. So Anne can have psoriasis, which is an autoimmune disease, and I can sit there and party with her all evening, and I'm not going to get psoriasis from her. Right? That's how easy this can be.
Yeah.
So,
that's
but
great.
but can one bird in the flock? So here's the real question that you're really asking, and this has been the problem before. The question was, a bird in a collection of birds. Let's say it's a group. This person has a group of birds in their house, and they're fostering or whatever the heck they're doing, and one of the birds dies, and you get the report, and it says, oh, it had it had bornavirus, it had lymphocytic plasmacytic ganglioneuritis, which is a hallmark histopathology. Okay, so then the person says, and this was the standard question by veterinarians, oh my God, like the fire engine.
Right. PDD is contagious. Everybody's going to die.
So we better test them all. We got to test all of them. Oh, doctor, there's like, and Bob will say, 30% of them are positive. This is going to be terrible. Well, hell, they were sitting there being 30% positive before you decided it was a problem.
Right.
Now that you stressed the shit out of them and you've altered their immune system with a disease that is affected by the immune system, yeah, some of them might die now because you've suddenly rung the alarm bells.
Right. But this is such an important point for people to understand, because over the decades, as you know, it's always been thought PDD is contagious. It's going to go through the flock. Everybody's going to die. And, not everybody speaks the language ganglioneuritis yet. They're still saying PDD.
Oh, right. Because they're talking about, I'm going to use these big words. They're talking about B cell, which is influenza or flu. And the body responds on this kind of B lymphocyte cell thing, or T cell is the word that's used. And T cell is the ganglioneuritis thing, that it's an autoimmune disease.
Right. But now that we've reframed how we look at it, it changes completely how people can respond or
correct. Now,
this potential drama.
And then the caveat that we keep bringing up is this egg thing. And obviously that's probably in my mind, it's one of the major things. So I'm going to say this probably, even if I don't retire, I want to see someone actually do this. And Bob has hinted that that's it with his Kias. And that is, it's a sexually transmitted disease. So if you take one bird that's positive and you put it in a cage with a bird that's negative, and if there's this sexual relationship between the two birds, or the fact that they're in very close quarters with each other, you can potentially take the the negative bird and make it positive. Mm-hmm. But if they're sitting in a cage next to each other, right. Nope.
That's because they're exchanging body fluids or eating,
Yeah, because the virus. So let's just say we're talking about bornavirus here in this situation. Bornavirus, and Bob can speak to this because he explained this to me a long time ago. It lives for a very short period of time outside of the body.
Right. So the moral of the story of that to me is that if you're testing for bornavirus and you want a fairly solid answer, get that lab sample early in the week, send it out overnight, get it to the lab as fast as possible, right?
If you want to check for bornavirus.
For bornavirus, right.
If you want to check for avian ganglioneuritis.
That's not
a different thing.
Right. Okay, so if we assume birds are not born with it and that it's an autoimmune disease, what is it that triggers that? Is it usually, a bird can be like Phoenix for 30 years, asymptomatic.
No, but it could be born with it, Anne. The prerequisite could be there.
Yeah. I'm talking only about ganglioneuritis.
Now you're starting to confuse people then by saying what you're saying, though, because it can be born with a bornavirus, but the ganglioneuritis is the disease condition. It won't get the disease condition until it has.
No, I'm saying if we think ganglioneuritis is acquired and birds are not born with it, what are the recommendations for avoiding a bird becoming positive for ganglioneuritis? Because it's an immune.
Low stress. Keep the stress down, because we know we see an influx of disease when birds are in the breeding condition. We see it when birds are moved from one location to another. So stress is a major factor.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing is you want to keep your birds healthy and not have them exposed to mycoplasma, chlamydia, paramyxovirus, all these other things that can cause it. Okay.
Campylobacter.
Right.
Campylobacter. Campylobacter is a biggie.
Where does that come
And
from mostly, Campylobacter?
environment, they
Because it's
ingest
not
it.
one of the tests, it's normally in the lab things we send it.
No, I mean you
So-
you can run a MindDog or a PCR for it, but there's certain strains, and Giacomo Rossi has actually a Campylobacter antibody assay, and if we can get that set up, that'll show that Campylobacter is basically the cause when we see the disease. I mean, we can tell they've got a ganglioneuritis from the antibody, but that's what I'm talking about, further defining it to certain gangliosides or to something like Campylobacter and so forth. Um, I did want to make another comment regarding a lot of the research and a lot of the things you're going to see on the internet, okay, are kind of conclusions based on research that's occurring at certain institutions. The problem is we are dealing with birds like cockatiels, which the majority of cockatiels I've seen ganglioneuritis in were ones that were inoculated against avian gangliosides. Clinically speaking, probably I can count on one hand the number of cockatiels that I've seen with avian ganglioneuritis. I mean, this is a species that's pretty resistant to it. Okay. So in these studies, they're using a bird that normally in Mother Nature, we normally do not see this disease in. Okay. But that's our model that we're using to make conclusions based on bornavirus and ganglioneuritis. The second point I want to add to that is the fact that we are exposing birds to just such a large amount of virus when they're inoculating these birds. It's much, much higher than what they're exposed to in the environment. And as Dr. Orosz alluded to, this virus, not only is it shed intermittently, but it's shed at very, very low levels. And and bornavirus. And so it basically disappears. If we're going to have a positive bird in a cage and another bird that gets infected, it generally takes years and it takes close contact among those individuals. And we have some anecdotal evidence that'll support that. However, we normally don't see that in, like aviary situations, as Dr. Orosz mentioned, where we have a cage with this bird, and this bird may be born a positive, and this one here may be negative. So that's something we normally don't see. So you really have to interpret these research papers that are coming out on bornavirus with, you've got to be somewhat critical because it doesn't necessarily fit what we see in nature.
Right.
So,
Okay.
make sense?
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that.
And can I just say one, so Bob keeps repeating stress, stress, stress. One stress is breeding.
Yeah,
He
we
mentioned
have
the
a
word
whole
breeding.
breeding section. We're only through half a page, 4 pages, so bear with me. Okay, so if this is an autoimmune disease, does the bird go positive because they have a low immune system to start with? Or does the disease, because it gets in the nerve somewhere, somehow, then lower the immune system? Neither one.
It's not a reduction. It's not a reduction in their immune system. Actually, it's their immune system being robust and attacking the nerve gangliosides. So it's not an immune deficiency disease. It's a disease where the immune system is attacking these, as Dr. Orosz mentioned, all of a sudden, here these gangliosides are exposed. Normally, they're sequestered in the membrane of the nerves, the cell wall of the nerves, and the immune system hasn't seen them. But when they get exposed, like when bornavirus is traveling up the nerve and they get exposed, The immune system says, oh, what's this? This shouldn't be here, and we're going to get rid of it. And so we get this inflammatory reaction.
So how come one bird can have that happening and doesn't, the nerves don't respond, and another bird it happens and the nerves go, whoa, you know, what makes that difference?
The exposure of the gangliocytes to the immune system.
But why would some birds have that response or that reaction and other birds wouldn't with this very same situation? Because if, you know, like you said, so many birds are bornavirus positive, just to focus on bornavirus as a cause, but they don't go symptomatic. They don't get ganglioneuritis.
Bornavirus hangs out in the cell nucleus, okay, which is an immune sequestered space. In other words, the immune system can't see it. And bornavirus replicates very slowly and at low levels. It has a number of different pathways to evade the host immune system. That's why the majority of the birds that are positive for avian bornavirus are normal and will remain normal throughout their lifespan. So, I mean, this whole thing about my bird test positive for bornavirus, like you say, oh, he's going to get PDD and die. That's a misnomer. That in the majority, 90% of the cases, that does not happen.
I'm trying to understand the difference, though, of why in some cases it does cause the problem. And for Campylobacter or chlamydia or whatever, what causes the bird to then go symptomatic with ganglioneuritis?
Anything that, like with Campylobacter, for instance, the host immune system recognizes certain strains of Campylobacter. These are not normal. We got to get rid of them. So they mount an immune response. With Campylobacter, it's a process called molecular mimicry. In other words, the antibodies that recognize Campylobacter also will cross-react to certain gangliosides because they're similar. And that causes then the immune system to attack these gangliosides. And that's why with a Campylobacter infection, we can get clinical ganglioneuritis because the immune system's cross-reacting with certain gangliosides.
I'm just trying to help people understand.
So you're still worried about it, but you're going to have to worry for a long time.
So we don't know what causes one bird to go.
That is correct, because you can't tell, because you didn't get psoriasis, but somebody else did, or somebody got myasthenia gravis.
I just want people to have the tools, if there are any, to know what to do for, because all the birds may be equally exposed to something.
Yeah, because everybody's immune system is not the same, Anne.
So what causes that difference, and what can people do anything about?
I don't know the answer to that. I do know that part of it is affected by the health and welfare of them as they are developing in the egg, and their nutrition within the egg, and the nutrition of their parents. And then when they're being hand fed, you see, that was the difference of how we knew something was going on. But if that mother bird is feeding those chicks, she is also imparting antibodies to them, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that we don't understand, but it's the same problem as why do some people get myasthenia gravis and some people don't? I don't know.
So there's nothing we can advise people here today.
Well, I think the whole stress issue and that reproduction is one of the stressors, and a really good diet, because one of the things that I talk about all the time with and chick development is vitamin E. And if a hen does not receive adequate levels of vitamin E, then the chick won't, and that's really important for the immune system.
Yeah,
I can tell you that nobody's ever measured that. So,
well, we know.
Well, I mean, in the developing embryo, that's only been done in chickens.
And of course, I always have you in my head that, when the hormones go up, the immune system goes down. So that
it's all
trigger. Yeah.
The thing you got to keep in mind, when the hormones go up, there is a certain immune competence that occurs, but that doesn't mean that the immune system overall is suppressed. But we do know when we get those stress levels and stress hormones, avian bornavirus tends to activate. And that's activation of the bornavirus, I think, is what causes, potentially causes this increased incidence that we see in the ganglioneuritis.
Mhm.
Does that
So
make
it's
sense?
it's neutral until the hormones get revved up, petting my cockatoo all the time, right? And then those hormones go up, and then
Well,
that
so, yeah,
activates.
yeah. So I'm giving you, the version that is simplified. And then when I do that, there's a little bit of part of it that's not right, which is what Bob is telling you. But my view is that when the hormones go up, that this bornavirus is sitting in that inside that nucleus and goes, oh, hormones
Mm,
are up.
mm,
It's time. Let's start dividing.
mhm.
And in general, the immune system of the bird, I'll use the word change then. I used to say the word, I will tell people that the immune system drops in the sense that, you see, because that embryo, regardless if it's a bird or a mammal, the embryo is not self, right? Because the embryo is something different. It's mixture of the genes between the mother and the father make it not self of the mother. So the immune system has to change and not get rid of it.
Mhm. Okay.
So I say the system that I use the words that the immune system goes down. We see more infections during this time. You know, those things all happen. But I think that the sex hormones, when they go up, that is a trigger for the bornavirus, at least when bornavirus is involved in this thing, which is a lot of the time. Then that's the trigger for the bornavirus to start replicating, and then when it replicates, that's when we get this destruction
Mhm.
that happens.
Okay. We had several people who asked that, like you mentioned earlier, you get the necropsy back and it says ganglioneuritis or, over the last few decades, my bird died of PDD. Did they really die of that, or did they die of something that the ganglioneuritis caused? Like, receptive to more bacteria or heart destruction, or is the ganglioside, the breakdown of the nerves and the myelin sheath, actually what kills them? Why is it that they die at that point? What kills them?
Combination of factors.
Okay.
We know, like with PDD, for instance, the we get slow transport of food materials through the GI tract. So that causes poor digestion, poor absorption of nutrients. So these birds tend to waste away. But also, we tend to get anaerobic bacteria like Clostridium that will grow and overgrow. And Clostridium produces toxins, which can affect the nerves and then further slow the GI transport. So it's a combination of factors that cause this.
Right. That makes sense. So, and if it's an old world bird who's got balance and seizures, etc., then eventually it's going to cause a stroke or something along those
Well,
lines.
that's not necessarily cause a stroke, but the inflammatory reaction can continue, and that's going to cause further debilitation of the bird. Okay. A stroke is when you have the blood vessels, the blood supply is interrupted. It's not necessarily going to cause that, but we know that with these neurologic conditions, these birds can't eat properly, they can't take care of themselves properly, drink properly. They don't eliminate food from their digestive tract properly. They decline.
Okay.
So it's a combination of factors.
Body
Yeah,
breaks.
but the tenth cranial nerve also does go to the heart.
There you go. That's true, and we've seen that.
Favorite cranial
So
nerve.
you can have problems with the right side of the heart, which could then lead to a stroke. Just
Actually,
Bob.
well, that is true. That is true. You're right. Indirectly related. I agree.
Um,
I actually had an African gray parrot, a perfectly healthy looking bird, normal feather, started picking over its chest, right over the heart. One little spot. That bird literally fell off the perch and died. Okay, quote, a heart attack. When we necropsied the bird, the histopathology showed the ganglioneuritis in the electrical conduction pathway of the heart. So
Wow.
going back to what Susan was saying, yes, it can happen.
It
Okay.
also goes to the, well, the tent doesn't, but the retina, it can be affected too. So you get some birds that become blind.
Mm.
You had a good case of that in
I did. That's when
Amazon.
we were first trying
Yes,
to figure this dang thing out. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
the most common species that you see ganglioneuritis affecting? And are budgies one of them? Somebody wants to know about budgies.
I don't see it in budgies. Cockatoos, I think, are right up there. Macaws, maybe the second to cockatoos and African grays, conures in that order.
Stomachlectus.
Mm,
Semiclectus, yeah.
mhm.
How
Yeah.
about you, Susan?
Yes, I'd agree with that. But I'm going to put in the caveat. I think that over time, because of the way the bird industry has changed, I believe that we will start seeing more cockatiels and parakeets with it.
Mm. Because of the mass breeding and lack of
Mhm.
parental feeding and all those issues. Yeah. And of course, green cheeks are like being bred by the millions these days, it seems like.
Yeah. So those guys, they tend to have a more subtle form of it. Would you agree with that, Bob?
Yeah,
Conures or green
yeah,
cheek?
agreed.
Well, conures,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
particularly the pyrrhura. Somebody asked about senegals and poicephalus.
Not so much.
Not so much. No, I would say not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Cape parrots, yes.
So if ganglioneuritis is an autoimmune disease, I think it's good to keep reiterating that. Should we?
I mean, people will disagree with us. Okay, let's be fair here to the other guys on the other side of the fence. But I think they'll eventually come around.
You look at the
Oh,
histopathology.
I know, that's why. I don't
The
understand why they didn't say
histopathology
that.
is an autoimmune reaction. It's a lymphocytic,
Oh, for God's
plasmacytic,
sakes, Bob.
B cell, T cell infiltrate around the nerve ganglia. That's an autoimmune reaction.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Absolutely. Jeez.
Ganglioneuritis is an autoimmune disease. Should we be?
Thank you.
Thank you. And if a bird tests positive, or even if they don't, should we be providing more immune support supplements or not? Should we be helping or not helping the immune system in our parrot care approaches?
Okay, so what are they positive for, madam?
I'm only asking about ganglioneuritis.
So the AGAA test.
Yes, but you're going to get
Clinical
into
or
it.
non-clinical?
Yeah, exactly. Either way, should we be supporting the immune system when they're clinical?
I always want to support the immune system.
Yeah, I agree. You have to support the immune system
Even
because,
though it's already overreacting?
well, it's reacting to these certain gangliosides, okay?
You
But,
want to reduce inflammation,
right.
right?
So
Right.
the treatment, yeah, reduce inflammation is the treatment, but you have to understand with the immune system, there are inhibitory cells, okay? Cells that keep the immune reaction in check. If you support the immune system, you're going to support a balanced immune response, and that's important.
Okay, great. Okay, good. I'm glad that's the answer. Okay.
Do you agree, Susan?
Yeah, I was just waiting if I was allowed to talk about what things I would do.
Yeah,
But
yeah. This is a
Yeah,
great
let's
time to
hear
do
it. Let's
that.
hear it.
Yeah,
Let's, because
please.
somebody
Well-
asked about treatment.
okay, so
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to the treatment section yet, guys.
well then keep
Oh,
going.
okay.
We'll
Keep
go there
going, yeah.
later.
All right. So let's talk about the tests. Just no, determining if a bird is positive for ganglioneuritis, not bornavirus. So I'm gonna
That's Bob.
preface by saying that only test for that in the United States is Dr. Dahlhausen's lab at VMD, and it's called the AGAA, right? Confirming,
Correct.
yes. Good. I was
This
curious,
test.
huh?
Can you go into more detail on the test, Bob?
Yeah, okay, so I have a series of questions about that. Okay, so
Okay.
when you do this test, it come out with a number, right? That's the new thing. Can you talk,
Now,
can you
you
talk
didn't used
now?
to.
Been used to. It's a wonderful progression of. Can you talk about that number and what it means?
You have to understand that the test measures a level of antibody, okay? And so it's on a progressive scale. And that's where the problem came in initially, because we were saying around 200, we're starting to see antibody levels that are somewhat significant. The bird may be clinical. It may have just subtle signs that you really have to look at to see, okay? Or you may not even recognize it. And so to say, well, that bird's positive, that bird's negative, it's not cut and dry. That's why we went to reporting the numbers out, because it gives you kind of an indication of the level of antibody. A bird with 200 may show subtle signs, may not be showing any signs. Generally, if it starts to get around 300 or above, generally the majority of those birds are showing clinical ganglioneuritis. So it's a progressive scale. It's a gradient. We do know that even with treatment, that those antibody levels will persist. So you can have a bird with, say, 300 that's shown clinical signs, and you treat the bird, and 6 weeks later, the bird's doing great, and you run another test and the antibody level's still high. Well, that's because you have this persistent antibody in the bloodstream. It persists for a period of time. And that bird may not even be clinical with a high level, like say close to 300. So it really depends. It's just a guide. It's a guideline. It's a piece of the puzzle, the clinical picture, and you have to evaluate everything in terms, in the whole clinical picture that you're seeing.
Right. What's the highest number you've ever seen?
700
Oh,
and
wow.
above. Yeah.
Do you ever see the number go down?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's encouraging to
I'm
people.
losing my voice here for a second.
Oh, sorry.
Um,
So-
yeah, there's a certain veterinarian that runs a lot of tests and repeated tests. We've seen that with treatment and resolution of clinical signs, the numbers do go down, but it takes time. We're looking at 6 to 12 months at least to see them start to drop. And like I say, they still may be detectable. They may be in that range above 200, but the important clinical aspect is that the level is decreasing.
So the antibodies will always remain in the system at some level forever?
Well, they persist for a period of time. I mean, look at you get a tetanus vaccination, and that's good for what, 10 years, they say?
Right. Got it.
So, I mean,
Hopefully longer.
yeah, hopefully longer. But the bottom line is that you've got to look at the clinical picture as a whole. In other words, is the bird improving with treatment? Is the antibody level dropping? We're heading in the right direction. We continue in that direction.
Do you ever see the myelin sheath nerves, go back again, or once they
Oh
get?
no, I think the body's got great repair mechanisms available for that, although they do take time, and it depends on the severity of the lesion and also the location of the lesion. Where's that lesion occurring? Is it in a major nerve? Is it in a branch of that nerve, and so forth?
Okay. So,
So does that mean we're on to treatment?
no.
No.
Do we know how many birds do we have a sense of how many birds might be positive but not be symptomatic, just like they are with bornavirus?
1 out of 3.
1 out of 3. We're supposed to study that very question, but anyway, 1 out of 3. Wow. 1 out of 3 positive birds are not symptomatic. Is that what?
Oh, no, 1 out of 3 are positive for bornavirus, I should say.
Oh, no, I want to know how
No.
many birds are positive for ganglioneuritis, but not symptomatic. Do we have any idea of that?
Well, it depends on the level of the AGA level. When you say
Yeah.
positive for ganglioneuritis, are they at a 400 or are they at a 150?
Do you think every bird has a number? They have to be positive to
Oh,
have
they all have, I mean, on the AGA assay, I mean, our bottom line is around 100. And,
Oh.
and that's just based on the nature of the test. It's an ELISA assay. And so we do know that there are certain things that can impact that. Hemolysis in the serum, bacteria in the serum can also do that. I mean, I get samples where I'll pop a tube and it just smells horrible. We know that serum sample's been contaminated. Bacteria, certain strains of bacteria can affect that ELISA assay. So again, it's a piece of the puzzle. You have to look at the whole clinical picture, okay, when we're evaluating these birds.
So you're saying, just to simplify, make sure I understand that if you send in samples for a set of birds, almost all of them would have a number with a bottom line being.
Well, they're all going to have a number because of the nature of the assay.
So
but
0 is not what you're aspiring.
We don't see
Okay.
0.
Okay.
100 or 100 is about the low end.
Okay.
You're always going to get some degree of reaction in the ELISA assay based on other aspects, not necessarily that antibody.
I never knew that. That's very helpful. Okay, so and then when you get to 200, you're getting kind of vulnerable. When you get to 300 and up, you might be showing more symptomatic.
300 and up, we tend to see, I mean, we're talking in generalities. It is an individual thing, but 300 and up, generally you're going to have some type of clinical disease. 200 says, oh, well, we better keep an eye on things and kind of watch and maybe recheck in, a month and a half or something and just see, where we're at. Because if it's progressing, then you've got a problem that's occurring.
Okay.
So Anne asked the question before, I think, if you have a high number, in general, will that bird show symptoms? And I would think the answer would be yes.
300 and above, I think is what you said, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
In transparency, Phoenix is now 334 or something, but I have hopefully,
Yeah, but you're managing Phoenix.
Shit out of her there,
What's that?
You're stressing the shit out of her.
I just want to understand it so I can do the right thing. And I know that a lot of people feel that way once they get, especially given the history of this disease, formerly called PDD, and all the anxiety that was spread through the parrot community about that. And then when the whole bornavirus equals PDD thing came out, people.
Well, but that's still, see, unfortunately, the people in power are still saying that.
Yeah, which is why we're here today, to try to be as clear and precise and helpful as possible. So thank you for that.
I mean, even if you feel that's your guide, as Bob is saying, the majority of birds that are born positive, they can die from other diseases, right? And the caveat was, Bob mentioned this before, Giacomo and I took a bunch of samples that the birds had clinical symptoms but tested negative for bornavirus. And we took those samples and sent them to an independent lab in Stockholm. And they tested for Campylobacter antibodies, and like 70% of them were positive for Campylobacter antibodies. So that's that other part of the tip of the iceberg.
Since Campylobacter is not part of the regular routine of testing with most veterinary offices,
no.
What are the symptoms? What do people need to look for? Since that
you're not gonna see anything.
Oh, you're not gonna see anything. Since it
no, but you will have a positive AGA level. Okay. And someone asked here about what do we test? We're testing serum, blood serum, because we're looking for an antibody that's circulating in the blood. So somebody mentioned crop secretions and so forth. No, it's just a small amount of serum that we need to test for it.
I haven't even looked at the questions in the Q&A.
I'm just
because I
kind of
know
watching them as
it'll
they
take us
pop up
off in
here.
all new directions. Yeah.
Yes.
So you, and just to close out the testing thing, you said that that birds that are positive for ganglioneuritis, what percentage would you say are roughly not bornavirus positive?
That's a tough question because we get a lot of tests where they'll run the AGA and the bornavirus, and I'll see negative for bornavirus and positive for AGAA. But we know that bornavirus is shed intermittently and at such low levels.
Could be a
So
false negative.
you've got to run, right, correct. You've got to run at least 3 bornavirus tests to have some degree of confidence that that bird is negative. And I can take a really positive sample on Monday, and by Friday, it will test negative because that virus breaks down so rapidly outside of the bird.
Do you
So,
recommend people send it by FedEx overnight so it gets to you faster?
no, I mean, well, yeah, if you want to check for bornavirus,
For
but
bornavirus, yeah.
I think the significant test is to run the AGAA
Mm-hmm.
because we know 1 out of 3 birds is going to be positive for bornavirus, and I mean, sure, it adds another piece of information to the overall clinical puzzle,
Yes, I sure
clinical
do, Bob.
picture.
I know
Pardon?
I keep running bornavirus tests.
Yes,
Why?
you do.
Why?
I think it gives you a better picture because there are times that the bornavirus test will be positive, but the AGAA test will be negative. But that's, again, as we're saying, it's reflecting the immune system of that particular bird.
So
And-
you test it to
And
get a
I
sense
don't
of
want
the
to get
immune
into
system?
the intricacies of this because then it'll make people crazy. But sometimes the immune system is truly not competent. And so that AGA level starts out probably low on Bob's
That is
scale.
true.
But it eventually, if you continue with the clinical symptoms over time, it's going to go up. So I like to, there are times where I just need to know that. I just want to know what's going on. Because again, let's say the opposite occurs. The AGAA is high, but the Borna test is negative. Well, it's either because it happened to be at the wrong time. When you tested it, it really does have bornavirus, but the test was what we call a false negative because things were such in the bird's body.
Wasn't shedding at the time.
It wasn't shedding at the time, or
Right.
because it wasn't doing breakout dancing in the nucleus yet. And then the other thing could be that it was Campylobacter. So what I think that we haven't said correct, well, Bob and I haven't said this so that other people understand this, which is the bird will get Campylobacter, but it doesn't get AGAA positiveness at that point in time. That occurs later.
Right.
So if you tested at that moment in time, let's say you did a My Dog or something and you check the fecal, the Campylobacter is an issue at that moment in time, which would more be GI, but the changes that would lead to a positive AGA would be later.
And where do birds get Campylobacter? What's the source of that problem? Is
Ingest
it
it.
bad
They
food?
ingest it.
But from
Ingest
what? Bad
it.
food, feces from other birds?
All of the above.
Do we know? Okay, we don't really know. There's not a common denominator. Okay. So you test for to summarize, you test for bornavirus to get a sense of the health of the immune system. Is that?
Yeah, and I just also need to know because
see, for what?
Can we talk about that in the treatment section then?
It's important to know if the bird is Borna positive because down the road if you see clinical disease, there's a possibility it's related to the bornavirus. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if it tests negative, it doesn't mean it doesn't have it.
Correct.
But what does the bornavirus actually do other than sometimes prompt ganglioneuritis? Does it do anything else in and of itself? I mean,
it hangs out in the nucleus and doesn't cause any problems in the majority of birds.
But when it does cause a problem, the problem is ganglioneuritis?
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. To me, it seems like this is just a hypothesis. that a lot of birds who feather pick are bornavirus positive. They have an inflammation issue. Is that possible?
Yes.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so
You want to
No, I
talk about
forgot.
treatment now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, tell us what your treatment is for ganglioneuritis, not bornavirus.
Okay, so as I sat there with Helga Gerlach in 2007, after we listened to Bob talk in Switzerland, Dr. Orosz, why do you think this is happening in these birds, and where do you think the virus hangs out?
Or you're talking about bornavirus.
Well, we didn't know that back then.
Okay. Just wanted to
Okay,
make-
so and you asked me why I test for bornavirus. Well, Bob already told us what Helga said, and I have to tell you, I say this all the time when I lecture, and I don't know why the hell the other researchers besides Bob don't test this, but she said it is in the vitelline membrane of the egg. She knew in 2007 it was there. Okay, so around that time
It being bornavirus, just to
is the
clarify again.
bornavirus.
Yes.
So the bornavirus has to have a way to be transmitted, right? So in my view, because of this whole egg phenomenon, the majority of bornavirus transmission is that I say it's a sexually transmitted disease. The virus is sitting quiescently or sitting there doing nothing in the nucleus, and then the reproductive hormones come up and it goes, ha ha, it's time for breakout dancing. Maybe the hen's gonna lay an egg. Ding, 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 ding. And so then there it is. It gets incorporated into this egg, and then it becomes incorporated into the chick. And then when the chick's immune system starts to play its thing, maybe it will happen then, but it might not happen. It might happen later. It depends what kind of immune system that little bird got and what antibodies it got from its mommy. And there's all these factors, which you want an answer to all those factors. I don't know the answers to, but I just know that when when the hormones go up in this bird, that's the more likely time that you will see the symptoms of avian ganglioneuritis.
So if a bird
Okay,
is bornavirus
so-
positive, they're more vulnerable, basically.
So therefore, treatment is going to be and I do this differently than a lot of these people because that's my working hypothesis, except for Bob, he does the same thing. Okay, so what I want to do then is I like to test to see if they have bornavirus because I want to know that because then I will know that when the hormones go up, when the reproductive hormones go up, then it's going to potentially start replicating, and that's going to be part of my problem. So I want the hormones to go down, right? Because if I keep the hormones down, then the bornavirus doesn't replicate, and therefore then the bird's going to have less symptoms or none.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why Susan does things like I use Depolupron, I use melatonin in the water. I've been recently messing around with Vitex. And then I want an anti-inflammatory. So from an anti-inflammatory, this is where Bob did the original work on Celebrex. And then further down the line, we've gotten information that robenacoxib, which is Onsior, can be used. And those are our big guns, or at least those are my big guns.
Yeah.
And then I want to try to make this bird's as healthy and as stress-free as possible. So this is where I want to balance my omega fatty acids, right? Because my omega-3s are going to reduce inflammation. I'm going to need a little extra vitamin E. I'm going to need a little bit of C. I'm going to make sure that my beta carotenes are okay and my vitamin A level. So I'm going to try to, I'm kind of do so I'm going to try this multi-pronged approach.
Mhm.
Okay. And stress, as Bob has said multiple times, stress is an important one, and stress we want to reduce. We want to reduce oxidative stress. We want to,
What's
which
oxidative stress?
oxidative stress would be the vitamin. That's why we add the vitamin C, the vitamin E, the omegas.
Antioxidants. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna do all those types of things to make this bird's system better, like, and anti-inflammatories. Okay, so I just listed the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. The other one that that you could think about are things like turmeric, ginger. But I have to tell you, turmeric and ginger by itself, if you get a really bad case, turmeric and ginger is not going to cut it.
Scott
Now,
Eccles recently told me that the only truly bioavailable turmeric is made by Mariva, which that form of turmeric is now available in the Now products, which you and I love, and USANA. It doesn't come in a powder; it only comes in a capsule or
liquid,
pill. Yeah,
the capsule, but the liquid.
no
Yeah,
liquid.
and so those are some of the things that I mess around with. That there was a study done by Sherman Hoppus. Ugh. That and another study, everybody was using the wrong doses. Why spend all the money for a study if you're going to not use doses that are the recommended anti-inflammatory dose? So she used a really low dose of Metacam, and it was what we would use in the word in veterinary medicine, an untoward reaction, which was, it was not a good thing. So it was bad. And so we know that you shouldn't use Metacam if you're suspicious that this is an avian ganglioneuritis case.
And of course, I've been using lion's mane, which I think has been fantastic. In terms of it's reportedly repairs the myelin sheath, according to an NIH study. So
It takes time.
it takes
all
time.
these supplements, the ginger, the
time.
turmeric, the lion's mane,
Right.
are kind of auxiliary supplements to use.
Right.
But as Susan mentioned, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories to reduce that initial inflammatory reaction are critical.
Right. When a bird goes symptomatic, you need to do everything in your toolbox to get it under control. Which is, of course, what I did. And then I moved to the, maintenance.
Maintenance. Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Phoenix is doing well now.
Knock on wood.
Today. Next week, when the hormones go up, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, there's a little regurgitation every now and then, and not the profuse vomiting and all the other stuff that was happening. So yeah, I'm counting on it being a good maintenance plan. Thanks to Cindy Brown's talk at our wellness retreat last year. All right, do you have any other treatment things you want to talk about, or do you want to move on to breeding questions?
I'll make one comment about the meloxicam. Meloxicam is a COX preferential inhibitor. It inhibits both the good and the bad cyclooxygenase enzymes. And we find that not only is that a problem, but also the bioavailability, I think, in birds it is formulated for the digestive tract of the dog and cat. And that's why we like the robenacoxa, because it's a pure inhibitor. And it doesn't affect the good cyclooxygenase enzymes. And the nice thing about it is, if you have birds that are showing signs, we know their digestive tract is not functioning normally. So rather than go with, we initially started with Celebrex because that's what we had that work, but then Onsior came on board, and we can use that injectable and bypass the whole transport and absorption from the GI tract. So that's why I like to at least initiate treatment with the injectable Onsior. Plus, the orals like Celebrex, ideally you should dose those orally twice a day. Whereas with the Ensure, we can do, depending on the signs and the level we use, we can dose it once every 5 days by injection up to once every 7 days, and it still be effective. So it's
We
much
think.
more,
We're not sure
well,
yet, though, Bob.
well, I mean, from a clinical standpoint, put a lot of birds on a certain level, probably around 15 mg per kg. And we dose them once every 7 days for 4 to 6 weeks. And the majority of them respond very nice.
And I mean, Anne, you were at AAV. Well, so are you, Bob, but there's a young researcher from the University of Montreal, and she's going to be looking at the pharmacokinetics of the injectable form of the Ensure. And that's an important thing that Bob is saying. It's the injectable form, not the oral form. And also when the GI tract is not working, if you stuff it full of stuff inside of the stomach, if the GI tract is not working, then you're kind of at a loss if you're going to try to give things that are oral, right? And
Yes.
so because the GI tract's not working, you're not digesting properly. So that's another reason why we go to the robenacoxib or the Ensure, because it's injectable. Another one that's injectable that you have to be very careful with in birds is metoclopramide, in terms of trying to stimulate GI tract motility. So, because if you get the 0.5 mg per kg doses, in many birds is a little too high for them, and they'll end up having neurologic symptoms. So then you're going, well, did I make it
Getting
better?
worse. It's getting
It's
worse.
getting worse. So is it getting worse because of the medication, or is it getting worse because he's getting worse? So those are the types of clinical things that you need to be running through your head about, as well as the client with their birds. So
I still have an Ensure shot in my freezer. Is it have a shelf life? I mean, it's like there just in case.
Get a new one. Get a new
1
one.
year,
1
about a
year.
year.
Yeah.
That's
Get a
most.
new one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you were asking about it in terms of birds that pluck their feathers. That's a horrible. There's a lot of reasons birds pluck their feathers.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah, we don't want to even go down that path.
Okay. All right. Okay.
You want there were some questions regarding breeder birds. Can I are we ready to respond to that?
Go ahead, Ed.
I think it specifically came from somebody who's concerned about a breeder who continues to have chicks come out that are positive for ganglioneuritis. So they want to know if the breeding pair tests negative, can the chick test positive? Well, we now know it has to be at the weaning fledging period when that kind of
Are we talking for bornavirus, or are we talking
ganglioneuritis?
Yeah, well, the parents
I'll bet you not. I'll bet you when they did it, they tested those birds for bornavirus. If I were to guess,
I would agree with that. Yes, yeah.
This is from somebody who is concerned about ganglioneuritis specifically, not bornavirus, and it's a breeding pair that continues to have chicks that later test positive. But now we know it could be for a variety of reasons.
It's most likely bornavirus, and the parents will, they're
see. That's why you should have tested for bornavirus.
There you go. Three times, at least 3 times, though. See.
Well, you want to always. So here's an important point about bornavirus testing, and that is, I always ask the question, and I know from the when you talk to behaviorists, they would they go, "Oh, you're full of shit," right? When you ask this question, I said, "Does the bird act hormonal?" Well, I'm not supposed to say it that way, but that's how I do. And if it does, the chances of the Borna test being positive is going to be so much greater than if it's during the non-reproductive season, or the non-reproductive season for that particular bird. So if the bird acts, like it has reproductive behaviors and it tests negative for bornavirus, it probably doesn't have bornavirus.
Okay, but this person is specifically asking about ganglioneuritis, that this breeding pair is creating chicks that later down the road are positive, get sick, and often die. And there's an ethical question here
Oh,
about,
absolutely an ethical question, and they shouldn't be breeding them.
so if both parents are positive for ganglioneuritis, is that something that should be,
If both parents were positive for ganglioneuritis, they would be clinically diseased.
yeah, and
If
I
the-
don't know, she or he didn't say whether or
Yeah,
not
that's
the
why I
parents
think
were
they're positive
symptomatic,
for bornavirus.
Yeah, they're
as
probably
opposed to-
positive for bornavirus. Yeah.
but down the road, they're getting sick and dying.
Yeah, yeah. So
It's
that's
just like the Kias that I mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, same thing.
So there's probably, unfortunately, there's probably not much you can do to influence, there's no
No.
enforcement procedure here to say,
Well, eventually, so that's why don't get me started. And that person probably, that's why they sell them before they're weaned. Because if they kept them until they're weaned, they'd start dying.
that's
And
when
then they go,
kill
well,
the
shit,
parent.
I don't want to breed these birds because I'm not making any money off of them, right? But
It's unethical, period.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Next.
I just have one bornavirus question because this is all about
Oh, you can't be.
ganglioneuritis to me. Yeah. So, are there symptoms of bornavirus?
No.
Exactly. That's what I think too, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, so many birds are infected with the virus. It's only when the virus triggers the autoimmune response that you see clinical
Correct.
disease,
The
which are
ganglioneuritis.
clinical signs.
Right.
The symptoms are what a bird would complain about, and birds don't complain about their symptoms, so it's clinical signs.
Right. Which would be
Make sense?
ganglioneuritis at that point, not
Right.
not
Yes.
bornavirus per se. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys have been obviously keeping up with the Q&A and I have not, so I'm going to go to it right now really fast.
And I'm gonna have to depart here pretty soon. I've got
Okay.
a wedding to get to, but I can just spend another 5 minutes answering questions for you.
Okay. So somebody was talking about Clostridium. I think this is a good time for you. Most people here today probably watched your March session
Okay.
with us,
Yeah.
Bob, where we did talk about Clostridium and Spectogard, but it's such a wonderful tool. I don't know if you want to mention Spectomycin or Spectogard. as
Well, the
related to
nice thing about
Clostridium.
spectinomycin is you can put it in the drinking water. It's not absorbed from the GI tract. In other words, it doesn't get absorbed across the digestive tract membranes. And so it works locally. What goes in the mouth comes out in the vent and the cloaca and the droppings, and it is very effective against Clostridium. However, we do see some resistance to it. And then you got to switch to another antibiotic, metronidazole, some of the clavamox, amoxicillins, azithromycin are effective against it.
Or doxy.
Yeah, doxy too. Yes.
That really smelly poop, especially for a macaw. has
Yeah,
often been
it'll
Clostridium.
smell like old socks, and it'll
It's
be
terrible.
watery. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
we've
see
had
that, you got to think Clostridium.
Clostridium. We've had some families who then take a fecal sample to the veterinarian and they don't see it and they won't make the prescription, which now you need. Spectogard, you used to be able to buy it on Amazon. Now you have to get a prescription.
Yeah.
Thank
Used to be
God.
able to get it at Tractor Supply.
At Tractor Supply, exactly.
Thank God.
I just encourage them to keep going back because when it smells
Well,
that
first
bad.
of all, here's the problem. I hate to say it this way, but a gram stain is a high-level test, unfortunately.
Hey, this is a time to plug our next wellness retreat at the end
Well,
of
yeah, because
May,
here's the problem, because
Bob
veterinarians.
is gonna do a mini wet lab with gram staining. and
Yeah, I think he's
microscope.
got me in that too. Anyway, the problem is veterinarians lost sight of the gram stain, which was a stupid thing. And they want a piece of paper that tells them what's on there. But the point is, all they need to do is learn how to look under their microscope. See, all they're looking for, because they don't know, they don't know. And so they're looking for gram negatives.
Yeah.
And so they don't realize that the real problem is that they can't find Clostridium, they can't find anaerobic bacteria, and they can't find Clostridial spores or other spores. Now, if they could do that, then they could actually diagnose the fecal gram stain correctly. We haven't even started with the coanogram stain.
Right, right. So
Take
if
the
they're not
time.
willing to do that, they should go get an account at My Dog and send in swabs, right?
I mean, just find someone who does a gram stain.
Yeah.
It's easy to see. It's
Correctly.
there.
A gram stain, comma, correctly,
Correctly.
Bob.
Correctly. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple more questions.
It's a piece of the clinical picture.
And the
And
reason is, I'm sure he said this, the reason that you get this, or yeasts, is because the GI tract has slowed down. Because of the ganglioneuritis, the nervous system isn't performing correctly.
Perfect.
It's slowed down. That's why the metronidazole and the metoclopramide. I don't like metronidazole in a parrot. You've got to be very careful because it can be toxic in the bigger birds.
Mm-hmm. Are there false negative ganglioneuritis results?
the AGAA,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if you're running it on a chicken, because we use a rabbit anti-chicken IG, immunoglobulin antibody. So all chickens will test positive. Also, also if you have a lot of bacterial contamination, a lot of hemolysis will tend to increase the level that's detected on the ELISA. So a good clean serum sample is what you need.
Okay.
The other one that we had is a bird. We had a couple, just what you were talking about before with the breeder situation, where the bird's immune system was starting to become competent, but they weren't yet. And
Yes.
so their immune system, there wasn't enough antibody production to make it positive at first.
Or birds that are so diseased that they're immune suppressed. I mean, they
Yeah.
get to the point that they just start to decompensate and, deteriorate and decline. And those birds, I don't know, for some reason, I mean, you will get an occasional one, but the thing to keep in mind is that the AGAA is a piece of the clinical picture, just like the gram stain is a piece. And the more information you get, the clearer this whole clinical diagnostic picture becomes. So it all, nothing is cut and dry, but everything kind of adds up together. And you got to look at everything as a whole.
Right. How often, if a bird is positive and symptomatic, how often do you recommend retesting with the AGAA?
I'd probably wait. I'd treat the bird and maybe wait after the bird's normal, another 3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months. Okay, great.
Yeah.
We've had several people ask about pregabalin instead of gabapentin. It's not something.
Pregabalin is what, Lyrica? I don't use that in birds.
Pregabalin. There were some people who asked about that by email earlier.
Yeah, I saw that. Pregabalin. I don't know. I haven't tried it.
Yeah, that's not really been documented in birds. It's used more for neuropathies, I think, in people. Yeah, I mean, I don't know any papers with its use in birds.
I know you all have talked in the past about gabapentin not being so helpful or not being at a high enough dose at a minimum. So it's not high on your list in your toolbox.
Clinically, I have not found it to be as effective as originally thought. And I think the dosing is suboptimal. I think Susan can comment on that. You probably need to bump the dose up, but I've never found gabapentin to be really that effective in birds.
Yeah. Is Celebrex safe long term?
Yes.
Yes.
That's great.
I've had birds on it for like 2.5 years with no problem.
And then Cassie was asking about USDA making a complaint if there was a breeding situation. I can only say, as having been approved by USDA and our Animal Welfare Act here, that if somebody complains, they come visit us. So I think it's definitely.
But they will if you're a public institution or if your birds are on display in the public.
Right.
Now,
Right.
I'm not sure what they're doing. They originally we're talking about investigating breeders and monitoring
There's a
breeders, but
threshold depending on
yeah,
the
I
number.
don't think they've gotten to that yet. So
Wouldn't hurt to make a complaint though. Can't hurt, right?
Okay, so one of the questions had to say, if the answer was not helping with proventriculus inflammation, does that mean it's not the right remedy? Well, it's not the right dose, the right dosing interval. And remember, I told you all that there are other things you've got to do. You can't just use one thing. You've got to reduce the hormones. That's a huge thing. So if you're not doing that, you've got to combine a lot of things. And the other things in terms of treatment that we did talk about is some of these birds are really bad, and particularly if it's their GI tract. And so that's when I use the critical care diet of Lefebvre Company, because it's the only product out there that is essentially like a pre-digested formula.
Emerade.
Yeah, the emerade product, because it's instead of proteins, it's the amino acids and the di and the tripeptides. So when it's, when it's partially digested fats, and Dr. Claesing made sure that it was also had an anti-inflammatory aspect to the bowel. So there's a lot of well, you could use this product or that product, but if you really have a digestive problem in a bird, it makes me angry that people are not being honest with all of us to say exactly what the product does. And the Lefebvre product is the only one that truly is the partially digested product that should be used in a situation like that. Now,
a lot of veterinarians don't stock it. That's the problem. So
exactly right. And then this flip side is once you get the bird in better shape, you can use some of these other products, because the thing, and I helped create this thing, but we left out fiber because our concern was we were trying to get the nutrients in and the nutrients at a high enough level. So that's really an important problem, that you've got to be using the correct formulas. If somebody has other issues, if you get a veterinarian out there, I can talk about ways that Dr. Claesing said I could jack up the energy in it. But that's number one. You got to use the product. You got to use things like cisapride or metoclopramide to help move the GI tract. You've got to give the Onsior. See, that's why I'm excited about this lady doing this Onsior thing. As now Bob and I are using 15 mg per kg for a parrot type bird, and I've dramatically shortened my dosing interval. So there's all kinds of things.
A lot of variables. Yeah.
Yeah, and
the other
there
thing
are birds that do die.
Well, it depends on the severity of the lesions too.
Exactly.
At the time treatment's instituted. I mean, if that proventriculus is ready to burst, it's so thin and you're not getting transport through the GI tract, to give them a dose of Onsior, it's not going to turn that bird around. So early treatment's essential. With that, Ann, I'm sorry, I've got to get to a wedding. I've got about 15 minutes to change and get out the door here. So I'm going to have to leave. I'm so sorry. Well,
and I can
thank you.
Stay on
Thank you, Ann.
for another 10.
Okay.
Thank you,
I do have a
Susan.
question for
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'll
Dr.
see you.
Dahlhausen.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Dr. Bob.
Thanks, everybody. We'll do it again. Thank
Okay.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. I didn't get a chance to ask while he was still here because he helped with this a couple of years ago. Male or Amazons that, or any bird, but especially Amazons in our experience, that are pulling at their legs, making blood, pulling at the skin on their legs. What does that mean?
Her legs hurt.
What's that?
Their legs hurt.
Their legs hurt.
Because Amazons don't pluck unless something's really wrong. They're very different than like a cockatoo or a gray. But there's a lot of potential reasons. So in all birds, you know, you've got this sacrum, which is where a bunch of the bones, here I am being an anatomist again. There's a bunch of bones that all come together, and then the blood supply and the nerve supply kind of runs there, and then it splits, it goes down to the leg. So if you have an older bird, I would be suspicious that we have some arthritis issues.
Heart disease, because they're not getting blood
Heart,
flow?
and then heart disease, because you're not getting adequate blood flow to the legs.
Mhm,
And you can, and that's the time when gabapentin might be helpful.
mhm.
And I just had another bird that came in this last week. I wanted to shoot the guy.
Uh-oh.
And so anyway, so here's one reason not to cut the feathers on your African gray, man, because what do African grays do? They
Yeah.
hit the ground, right? And where do they hit it? Because they're so heavy bodied, they hit it around their tail.
Oh, and their tail, break their tail.
Yeah, and so then their legs get a little and they start chewing around their tail head,
Mhm.
which Amazons are a little bit, you know, they're heavy bodied, Romeo. And
Yeah.
and so then they can get these painful
Infection.
reactions and these shooting pains. And that's one time that gabapentin can help you.
Mhm. Yeah, and if it's the tail, I know Scott Eccles is big into, tail disease and that infection that won't heal and yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of
So one of the other things that I use medically for that, besides trying a variety of pain drugs, is, you know, pain drugs are also very individual. Certain birds respond, one bird will respond one way and another bird will respond differently. And then the other thing that I try to use, which the FDA took off the market because it said it doesn't work, and that is isoxaprine, because man, I've seen it work in horses, I've
Oh,
seen it worked in birds, because it's going to increase the blood flow to the feet and the legs.
we have a lot of birds that are on that right now. I
Yeah,
don't know
and then the other
what
one
the
is
backup
Yvonne
gonna
von
be.
Zielen's pentoxyphylline. So you can combo those things, and sometimes those help. Sometimes they don't, but they
What do we
can.
do when we can't get the isoxaprine anymore? What's the next best
Uh,
option?
you talk to the horse vets.
The birds that we currently have on lifetime prescriptions.
Yeah, the veterinary profession's gotten it back.
Oh,
So
okay.
through the
Okay.
equine, we were for a while getting it through the horse vets because I had horses.
see.
So I wrote scripts against my horses.
I see. Okay. So well, it's like, right now we can't get Vet Omega because the factory, shut down and hopefully we can get Vet Omega and get
Yeah, I use the Now product.
what you use for omega-3? What do you use?
Yeah, I use the Now product for that to replace the Vetomega.
Now, which part of now? I'm not sure. I don't know any.
They
I
they
love
have, I
now.
don't know, just call the office. It's
Oh,
we get the
I didn't know they made a liquid.
yeah, they do.
Because I was asking Scott Eccles what he recommended as a backup to that.
He
and
doesn't.
He said just get a really, a flax oil basically. But I just wanted to leave that with everybody
Yeah, you gotta
today.
be
The
careful with flax
omega-3.
oils, right? Because if they're not stabilized properly, here comes the stabilization aspect, then it doesn't really work.
Mhm.
So that's why I Now has done such a good job, and they always get a high rating on consumer labs. So
Yeah.
I use the Now product.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I'll go for now too. Well, I just wanted to make a pitch for omega-3s for people listening today. I think it's one of those good preventative things everybody can do regardless of the status of your bird's health.
Yeah. But any kind of bird is picking its feet for some bad reason. I mean, sometimes this time of year, we're having a lot of conures in our area that are picking the shit out of themselves.
Hmm.
And we can't seem to stop it.
Okay. Yikes. Well, do you have any closing thoughts for everybody in this complicated issue that we're still trying to wade our way through and
Yeah,
understand?
I think I think this is how I want to say it. This is a disease. This is what I truly think, having really worked on it for over 40 years because I started in San Diego, California, where it was first described. And I worked with the veterinarians where we saw those birds that were described. And so I think this, and I've always been intrigued by it because in my first life, you didn't say this to anybody, but in my first life, I was a neuroanatomist. And I taught neuro to I taught neuro to MDs, students. And this is an autoimmune disease. And this is an autoimmune disease that is stimulated by reproductive hormones. And when you understand that aspect to it, that's how you want to work on treating it. You want to have anti-inflammatories that affect that type of disease process on the neuro side, where Metacam does not. And I see a lot of veterinarians making the mistake of using Metacam instead of using robenacoxib or Celebrex. And so that's kind of the thing that you just have to understand that. And if you understand that the immune system changes when the hormones go up, and it causes this to be worse, then you want to do the things that help get rid of the stress of all types. And Gloria, I saw Gloria Goodman passed in there about Depolupron. Oh yeah, I've given those conures Depolupron, man. I've done, ugh.
There was
And
a
I
lot of
still
talk
can't.
about that at
Yeah, we
AAD
won't
and
talk
how
about
it's
that. But
illegal. Yeah.
Depolupron is one of the things that we do want to consider. So I'm going to be using it more than some other people who remain unnamed. And I do it because I'm trying as one arm to reduce the hormones in these birds, because then it often makes them better.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult disease. It's difficult because it's hard to diagnose because it's not the bird has diarrhea. It has diarrhea and it can smell bad because its its digestive tract isn't working right. So it depends where, let's just use, often it's going to be bornavirus, where that virus or where that Campylobacter or where those things hit the nervous system and that particular species at that particular time in its immune health then determines the neurologic symptoms. And so it's not a really straightforward thing. It's not like, oh, look at the big heart. This is what we're going to do. And so it's tricky. So you should not feel that it's impossible and that your bird is going to die. Yes, some of them will. But
for the most part, it's manageable.
But most of the time, as I say to the distraught owner, your bird has the opportunity to die from something else.
Right.
Particularly the birds that we can have a treatment plan where the treatment plan is working. If you're doing things like using Depolupron, using Onsior, using, and maybe even just Cisapride, you may be using some Emerade critical care diet from Lefebvre Company, and the bird gets better. Then, and this is the time you got to bare your chest, right? So I have a bird that's positive for bornavirus. That's before we had the AGAA test. Bob only had the Borna test, and sometimes he has a bad time of it when his immune system kind of hangs out there and his hormones go up, and then it will be years that he will have a problem again.
Have you done the ganglioneuritis test on Romeo?
Yeah, I think I did. I think he was positive at a time when I caught him falling off the perch. And then what did I do? I gave him a Depolupron and an Onsior and he got better.
There you go.
So there you go.
It helps to have a good avian veterinarian in your area.
Oh
That's
yeah,
also
yeah. Except the avian veterinarian, just like people in Phoenix Landing, might not necessarily be good at treating them properly.
What? What do you mean?
Grabbing the dang bird, like Romeo and I love each other until the moment when Dr. O has to say, "Okay, it's time for your treatment." Wham! And I gotta grab his little butt off the perch and do something with him. It's better if I do the injection, giving him oral meds. Oof, he's
Well,
bad.
we're lucky to work with a lot of great veterinarians up and down the East Coast, but I know some people here, and I'm sure in many places, don't have access to
No,
a good
yeah,
avian
and they're
veterinarian.
distraught. I mean, they're
Yeah,
distraught. And like I had somebody last week asking questions, um, because it's not easy to figure out neurologically sometimes if that problem is from bornavirus, if it's because there's changes in this bird because he's aging and his cardiovascular system is having a problem. He has severe arthritis, and there could be combinations of problems. See,
right,
so it's not as simple.
right.
And if you're not, if you as a veterinarian are not really into the, you got to treat all kinds of stuff. I got dogs coming in and cats coming in, and now I got this bird coming in, and I can't read a gram stain properly.
Right.
You
Well,
can't.
as the creator of our wellness retreats, do you want to make a pitch for next year's?
We sure as hell do, man.
Next one
want
is
y'all
May
to-
30th, 31st, right?
Yeah.
You want to say anything about it?
Well, it's we're aging. And so if you want to, it's time for you guys to come if you haven't come, because we don't know how many more we have. Ann and I have in us, but Dr. Bob's going to be there, and others are going to be there, and Scott Stahl, and we've wrangled him, haven't we, to do this?
Yes.
Yeah,
We
I
have a
thought we
nice
did.
lineup. Yes, we do.
Yeah, and we have a nice lineup of speakers, and it's a time for people to sit around. Like, I mean, we could sit around all day and talk about bornavirus, but or other things, and we're going to talk about a lot of other things, and we're going to try to do more as much as we can with more hands-on,
Right.
so that you're
More
just not
audience
sitting.
involvement. Right.
Yeah, we don't want you
Yeah.
sitting there like a lump on a couch.
Right. Yeah, we're going to build, we're going to stain, we're going to train, we're going to do all kinds of things. But I also think it's one of the, as far as I know, it's the only place you could go where a really nice blend of the parrot community. You've got the, people who love their birds, bird owners, you've got the medical community, the behavior community, the welfare community. It's just a nice time to
And the
cross
veterinary students.
veterinary students. It's just a really nice blend of attendees, and it's fun. So we hope you'll put it on your calendars.
It's a great place to go.
Yes, Asheville's the best. So registration starts soon. But anyway, Dr. Orosz is the one that created them, and hopefully we'll keep them going regardless of what happens to the two of us. So yeah.
Yeah. Because I patterned it out after the Mid-Atlantic States AAV conference.
Right.
And because we want it to be a time for people to sit and discuss and ask questions and really
Network. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because just because I'm thinking about it this way, and somebody tells me, "Hey, Dr. O, I think you're wrong," and this is why. And those are really great moments. Those are great
Yes.
because I hadn't considered that, and I love learning, so that's a good time.
Exactly. Always learning. We've been dealing with birds for decades now, but I feel like I don't know anything. The more I know, the less I know, the less I really know. So
Yeah, absolutely true.
yeah, people who think they already know everything usually aren't giving their birds the best kind of life. So anyway, enough said about that, right? Anyway,
Right.
thank you for all your time today and your wisdom.
Thank
and,
everybody for being here, and
and
thank
speaking
you.
in a way that we can actually understand your brilliant mind without going deep into
I didn't say much neuro, I have to admit.
No, we appreciated you simplifying it for the rest of us, so thank you.
the
Okay.
dorsal vagal nucleus in the medulla. I didn't say that at all.
Well, I have the 10th cranial nerve in my head that you taught me, decades ago. And it's all, when in doubt, it's the 10th cranial nerve. Yeah.
Yeah, when in doubt. Exactly.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. I hope you'll join us again next month. And this will be posted on our website at our past event recording page, because there was a lot of detail here that you might want to go back and hear again. So anyway, thanks again for being with us, and we'll see you hopefully again next month. All right.
Yes,
Bye,
hopefully.
everyone.
Yes, that's what we want. Bye
Okay.
now.
Bye.